I'm almost home now. Everything seems to have survived the trip. This is, I don't know what I'm going to call this one. This is a RS125 with a 4-stroke dirt bike motor in it. It's a 150cc Radiator. It's going to take some work. There's no carb in it right now. Doesn't run. Nice little frame. Not hooked up, so it has some work to be done. No chain. But it should be complete. I have rolled the bike in here, parked it, making room. The only other thing I noted is when I was unloading it from the truck is the brake lever. Seth mentioned this. Goes clear to the bar, no pressure whatsoever. So my guess is it has some air in it. Hopefully that's the extent of the problem. That'll have to wait till this weekend to figure out the answer to that. Handlebars are bent here, so I'm gonna replace those. Pretty straightforward. Then it's getting a motor in it and making the motor run. Steering damper. I honestly don't know if that's needed or if it was only mounted for racing tech inspection. I don't know how twitchy this bike is or anything else, so maybe that's needed, maybe it isn't. I may take it off if it's not needed. I'd rather ride it first and then find out it doesn't need it than leave it in place. Okay, that's gonna be the next sort of December 26th project to see if I can make that run. The other piece here is the radiator. Again, we have a temperature sensor clamped around the hose that goes up to the instrumentation up there. Mounting the radiator is a problem, but now that we're in here, I did discover there seems to be a bolt here on the radiator. This is siliconed in, so it's not connected to anything, but on the frame I have a hole there, a bolt there. I may be able to make a bracket to attach this side. There's nothing else holding it other than the other side of the bike. So we need to get that out of there. In the center here, this bracket, there's nothing to bolt to. It was glued on, which obviously didn't stay put. So I'm going to come up here on the backside and remove this plate. Unnecessary at this point. Maybe I can take advantage of that later. The other item here is on the frame. There is a pin here, so I may be able to put a rubber grommet around the pin and secure that with a bracket. Somehow I can make a bracket that will hang down and attach to the radiator somehow there. I need to get rid of the steering damper. It's really kind of in the way. I could put it back on later, so I'm gonna pull that off, but we need to figure out a solution for the radiator, because long term, that's not gonna fly. Anyway, the brake is off. Next step is we need to do the valve lash on the motor. So I need to take that apart and measure the clearance, and then we're gonna have to reshim the valves. Seth said they're bad, or on the verge of being out of tolerance, so now is the time to do that. Okay, I unbolted the steering mount, or it's a steering damper. Now it's a little more obvious. I can see this boss on the frame that possibly making a bracket off of for the radiator. We'll see. I've taken the body work off the bike for today. I am going to get started on removing the engine. This is my first real look at the bike and where everything is. I'm just making notes here for my journal so that eventually when I try to put it back together, I'll sort of remember what to do. Anyway, I need to drain the coolant out. The radiator is not held on well. This is pretty much all there is. So I need to drain the bolt, get the coolant out. I'm noticing the engine mounts on the front Back there, nothing is tightened, so it looks like the engine is ready to drop out pretty quick. The exhaust system is not secured or mounted anywhere at the back here. It's literally just kind of hanging there. It does have a mount at the front up in here, so it's not completely loose, but in my opinion there needs to be a better solution. Engine mount here, again not tight. Kickstart shaft removed. I don't have a Kickstarter for it, nor do I want to kickstart it. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. I need to come up with something to mount the radiator a little bit better. Brake master cylinder is grody, so there's a lot going on here. Looks like the fluid is maple syrup. Carb is out of here. Ignition is in the box over there. Taking the carb apart to clean it. The other note is that the coolant connection to the motor here, it isn't bolted up properly. This chrome bracket piece here, I don't know if I can see that correctly. It's janky. It has a plate sort of holding it on, but it's not ideal. Anyway, that's because the routing up here goes toward the center of the bike. Routing down here, if I mounted it up with the bolt right here, here's the opening in the plate, here's the bolt. It's like almost 180 degrees. That would put this out to the side, so that hose would be pointed in two different directions. Maybe there's a better fitting I can source from somewhere. Okay, the other point is up here on the radiator. It looks like it was glued on. There is this piece on the frame here, sort of a mounting point, but there's nothing on the radiator itself. So the radiator is literally being held on by the hose there, nothing's supporting it. There's a hole in the frame up here, so maybe I could tap that, make a bracket to support. There are some supports here, they just don't match up to anything on the frame. It's the aluminum plate someone made to mount the motor. That's interesting. I'm glad I am not having to do that. But I also hope that the sprocket lines up with the rear wheel correctly. Okay, not sure about that. But I guess that's it for now. I will take the motor out next because the valve lash, Seth says it's super tight, needs to be set to spec to make it reliable. Change the oil, put the carburetor back together, set up the carburetor. Those are kind of prerequisites for making it into a functional motorcycle at this point. Okay, I've made a bit more progress here. One of the things was removing the handlebars. I've put on fresh new clip-ons, spaced them correctly, adjusted the rotation. Right here on the mount, there's a peak here. I'm lining up that with the corner of the bolt here so that my angles are consistent. Same thing on this side, the edge of the bolt lines up with the peak here of the clip-on mount. And then I've set equal spacing for the bars on both sides. So I have unbent handlebars. This is what we had previously, not straight. So dealing with some of these inconsistencies. Well, the carb went through 3 rounds in the ultrasonic cleaner. I put the float bowl back on, put the jets back in, and reassembled everything. The slides back in. At this point, what it needs is to have the accelerator pump. I put the carb cover back on. I'll need to take that out. But down there in the bottom, I need to set, oops, wrong side. Down here in the bottom, the brass accelerator pump. I need to make sure the timing of the squirt doesn't hit the slide. So that is to be done at this point. I'm going to set that aside for a while. That's why I put everything pseudo back together. and I need to work on setting the valve lash. The last thing I've done so far is drained the coolant. Yeah, it's yucky. A lot of particulate matter came out of the drain hole. I'm going to take that out and really try to clean everything up. I am going to put coolant back in it, not just straight water. So radiator needs to come back off, or needs to come off. I haven't taken the hose clamps off yet. But get that drained out, clear it out, and then work on the valve lash. I've taken the radiator off, removed it, and getting all the coolant out. I took the cover off, and yucky. That's gross. That doesn't look very good either. Anyway, we will clean that up. I need to flush out the motor. It's had nothing but water in there, obviously. That's why it's rusty. Clean it up, back flush it. And if this motor's no good, I have a second motor that came with the bike. So hopefully between the two, we'll get something to work. Now that I have the motor out, I am gonna work on the valve lash. So I've taken the valve cover off. But looking back on the bike itself, here are the motor mounts. Here is a problem. The way this has been fashioned, there's a single plate here and there's a single plate here. So this forms kind of a scissor linkage. That's not rigid. This end of the bolt can move around a bit. Even when the motor is tightened up, this isn't fixed. It's not a single plate. It's not rigid. I need to have a TIG weld ran to weld these two plates together all the way around. Otherwise, I have two engine mounts. One down here to the engine. Sorry, this is not a good view. There's my clutch cable. Anyway, so there's one mount here at the back, and then there's only one at the front. I only have two mounting points for that engine, and I do not like that. I'd really like a third engine mount, but the CRF motor is only designed with two, so that's kind of limited. Takeaway is I need to make sure this is 100% as solid as it can possibly be. So I need to re-engineer what the designer, for lack of a better word, did when they created this engine mount to put this engine in this frame. So TIG weld's going to be needed around that. So that means there's an extra step that needs to be done here for this bike. This is going to be more work than I had planned. Again, TIG weld around here. But I don't want to have to find out the hard way that it was insufficient. So add that to the list. Here's the new replacement radiator I got. It is not a Honda part, but installed on here, it does mount up to the stock points on the frame on both sides. The other radiator that was in here before did not have those mounts. In fact, it was pretty much supported just by the hoses. One concern here is that the way this is mounted, it will pivot back, but there's not much clearance between the front tire. Perhaps this is perfectly adequate and not a problem, but with that much travel, I think the tire is going to hit the radiator, which would be bad. The reason for that is the mounts up here. You can see they hit the frame before it goes back. It's actually not that side that's causing the problem. It is actually this side over here. As it pivots back, the mount is hitting the frame here. So adding some relief here would allow that to pivot back a little bit further and clear the wheel a little bit better. So I may need to do a little bit of a modification on this radiator. However, hopefully this solves my cooling mounting problem. The other problem I had here, or to be solved, is that there is a mount on the bottom of the radiator here and the tab on the frame, so I need to create a mounting linkage here to connect these together, and that will secure the bottom of the radiator. The radiator that was originally on the bike, you can see it is substantially smaller. It has no mounts anywhere on it except for this crude bracket that was in place. Hopefully this will give it a little more secure mount, but just to compare, there's quite a bit of difference in area. So the radiator on here is a aftermarket Chinese radiator. Hopefully it doesn't have any leaks or issues. There's no coolant in it currently, but I'll need to get this fabbed up and finished on the bike. So once I get the motor back in, hopefully some liquid cooling. So far so good. I am happy that it mounts to the frame in the original location, because I cannot get a radiator from HRC for this bike. And here's the A motor that came out of the motorcycle. See, the cover here is silver and is stock Honda. Also, the sprocket is still on the motor at this point. Obviously, I still have the coolant line, but that's how I'm keeping track of which one is which at this point. Back to setting my valve lash at top dead center on the intake valves. I can't get any feeler gauges in there, none of them. This essentially tells me I have zero valve lash, or I don't know how to measure it. Seth told me that these were tight. Okay, I've never run it, I'm taking that at face value, but when I measure it, that really seems to be the case. So I need to reshim these valves, but again, I can't even get a valve measurement, so I don't know what the actual clearance is. So this is kind of problematic. The exhaust valves here are extremely loose. They have huge gap in them. My thought was I could reshim these using shims from that motor if needed. So I'm not sure. I need to check this motor and figure out what the valve lash is on these. Likewise, it feels very, very loose on here as well. So I'm not sure of if I have anything I can use from this motor up here on this one. Anyway, this isn't a major repair. This is just setting the valve lash. Anyway, the deeper I dive in here, the more I find. Okay, so I got the cam tower removed from the motor, and I have an unexplainable mystery here. What it is we had zero valve lash gap on the intake valves. We had excessive gap by a little bit, it's not hugely off, on the exhaust side. So you can see the shim on the exhaust side sticks up past the retainer. That's normal, that's what we expect. If you look at the exhaust valves, they are recessed, which means that the retainer is pressing on the inside of the tappet bucket. Essentially, that is providing no adjustment for the height because it's sitting below the height of the retainer on both valves. So the valves are currently too tight, which the only way to fix that is to put bigger shims in. But the problem is that does nothing because it's, I can't explain that. These should have been protruding through the top and we get more gap by putting a thinner shim. Well, it's countersunk here. You can't put a thinner shim in there to make it work. So I'm not sure what the story is with this motor. I'm gonna take a look at the other motor and see what I get off that. Maybe it is better, but this one I absolutely can't explain while I have zero valve lash and those shims are countersunk essentially. Bit of a mystery to say the least. Back out on a different day, I took the bolts out here and I'm taking the cam towers out and taking everything so I can get to the bolts on the cylinder head. I need to figure out why I have no gap on the intake valves. So I'm going to take the bolts out and take the head off. So I got 6 total bolts here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I'm going to pull that off and look at it from the bottom side and figure out why those valves are not the right height to be able to adjust the clearance. It's really weird. Anyway, this is the A motor. We can tell because it has the red cap. No, I'm sorry, this is the B motor. The B motor has the red cap. The A motor has the silver one. So again, just trying to figure out, the other engine has the same problem with the valve, so maybe this one will inform why the other one is the way it is. I forget to make a future note, the A motor and the B motor, it's just a designation. How do you tell them apart? Well, simply right now, the A motor that was in the bike has a sprocket on it. This one does not. The other note is that the plug here is a red aftermarket one, whereas the other motor has the stock silver Honda part. So visually, that's how I tell the motors apart. The cylinder head off, I have a bit of a surprise here. Look at that piston. That looks like a piston that has never been run. That is squeaky clean. So wasn't expecting to find that in this motor. Again, obviously there have been some modifications there externally, but for the most part, that's interesting. Anyway, the inability to get the valve lash set up, that I'm not sure about. So obviously that motor has been apart. Overall, I don't see anything too visually wrong. There are deposits on the valves, etc., but not sure why the lash isn't correct. So anyway, I am going to clean the head up at least. I don't see anything obviously wrong. Okay, next step. I got the cylinder head removed from the A engine. I did mark the engine on the side, A. I also marked the cylinder head on the side, A, so I can keep track of, that's the B motor, that's the A motor, and we're trying to figure this out. Took the cylinder head off. The other piston looks brand new. This one is clearly has been run. So that tells us the engine's been run. Head is off. I need to take the valves out. Same problem on the intake valves here. They are too tight. No clearance. So I suspect that those valves are recessed into the head too far. Then I'm gonna have to take the valves out to make that determination. Anyway, that's what I see on the A motor at this point. I'm just gonna let it sit here. I will clean up the piston. It looks pretty good. It doesn't look like it's been run too long. The other comment here is there's a lot of carbon. Look at that plug. That's very black for something that doesn't look like it's been run very long. That's a lot of carbon. Anyway, I will clean this up, take the plug out, replace the plug. A lot of deposits there. So not sure about the valves, but I'm thinking that the intake valves may need to be replaced. They are probably worn into the head pretty far. Anyway, that's what I have. Okay, I've got my valve spring compressor. I took the split keepers out. I should be able to get the valve loose now. Just need to take the frame out, and do the next step. Okay, I've got in here, I cleaned up the surface of the head and I've removed one of the valves. I've taken the valve springs out for the exhaust side, and then I'm going to take the valves out for the intake side, but I'm just starting with one valve at a time, checking the valve seats and overall condition, and I'm going to try to clean things up a bit. Here's my exhaust valve. There are some deposits on it, so with a screwdriver I'm kind of rubbing the shaft there and getting the carbon off. Is that a better shot? Anyway, just trying to clean this up. Not surprising there's carbon on there, it's an exhaust valve. So I will finish cleaning that up and move on to the intake valves next. I only want to do one valve at a time so I don't mix things up. It will clean things up, put the valve back in, move on to the next one, and work my way around. Anyway, I'm trying to keep parts from getting lost and mixed up. Okay, this is my valve cleanup job. I put the very end of the stem in the drill. I'm just spinning the drill, and then I'm just wire brushing it. So I think that I've managed to get most of the carbon off. It's pretty smooth now, which is good. And then I cleaned off the face of the valve as well. I will put this one back together in the head and move on to the next one. Next cleanup item is I'm going to take a little valve grinding compound and clean up the face of the seat and the valve. I just want them to match up and seal nicely, so a quick little polish on there. And then I'll clean that up, clean the valve off, clean the compound off. But the seat doesn't look too bad. But again, I do want to make sure it's perfect since I already got everything completely apart. I'm trying to be sparing about how much grinding compound I put on there, and then I'll assemble this. And I'm going to use the drill, just a few quick little spins. I don't want to remove a lot of material and change the clearance too much. But this grinding will recess the valve a little bit and tighten up the exhaust. The exhaust was already loose though, so it's not going to make it any worse. Okay, here's the cylinder head. I have removed one of the valves. Sorry, my camera doesn't focus very well. See if I could show the valve with a bit of a background. That valve face looks extremely worn to me. Again, I don't have a brand new valve to look at, but that one looks like that is just, wow, really recessed. Here's the other valve in here. It looks really recessed into the head to me. I am not a mechanic. I don't know anything about this particular motor in general, but the fact that I can't get any valve clearance makes me think that it is the valves are very worn into the head. I have 2 intake valves on order. I'm going to put 2 new intake valves in here and see if that will restore some of my clearance. I'm going to have to lap these into the head. I don't know. This is just really odd. Again, looking at this with the head off, boy, those really look recessed in there. Anyway, that's what I see after taking the head off. I have here a brand new intake valve compared to the old one from the motor. Let's see, intake valve has been removed, and I suspect that the valve itself, I don't know if I can show this on the video or not. Okay, so if I look at the shape of the valve seat there, you can see it looks like it's recessed and concave. Looking at the new valve, it's flat. And that whole surface looks like there's a lot more contact with the head than the old valve. So maybe that's why I can't get any valve clearance out of it. I've inserted the new valve into the head here, trying to get a comparison. It's hard because of the color of the valve. One's used, one's not. This one, the older valve, looks like it recedes a little bit. There's a little bit of a protrusion here. Maybe that's the difference that it takes to get the valve clearance to work. So I need to lap the valve in to make sure it's seated in the head and that this surface matches the valve so it seals. So I am going to do that. It's really hard to make this focus. It does appear to me that this valve seat is pretty damn worn. I don't know that this is gonna be something I continue to run. I don't know if this is something someone else did to try to do a multi-valve job at some point. No idea. Anyway, I need to get this valve in here and see if that solves the problem. Okay, I have put my intake valve on the left in, that's the new one, and this may or may not show very well, but looking at the valve on the left, it looks to me to be a little bit lower than the one on the right. That's what I'm looking for. I need to get a little more clearance on the left. It needs to be lower, so I think this is a good sign. I don't have any way to directly measure that. So I will do the second valve on the right, and we'll have to put the head back together and put it in the engine and measure it. Okay, newest interesting observation is that the valve, when I press it down, I can't extract it. It won't come out. It should just slide free. The other one did, this one is not. So I can push it back in, but I suspect that the end is flared out. Hard to see. But I think I need to cut the end off the valve in order to free it from its valve guide. Again, I don't want to cause damage by hammering this through to get it out the other side. So I think I need to cut off the end. Again, it gets right to the end and then stops, so it makes me think this end is flared. You know, repetitive pounding, etc. as the engine operates. This wasn't working, so I did a total revamp and wrapped the cylinder head in masking tape and then put my little cardboard bib on. I'm then gonna cut the end of the valve off using a Dremel. Okay, hopefully it didn't get any metal inside the cylinder head. Okay, I need 2 hands. Okay, the job is done. I've cut the end of the valve off. Now I'm going to take the cardboard and the masking tape off and see if I can free that valve. Okay, there's the valve. Cut off the end. And just need to finish unwrapping it and we'll try to take it out. Okay, there's our valve. So far looks good. I need to, okay, I got everything unwrapped and let's try pushing the valve down. There we go, comes right out, perfect. So the end of the valve was flared a little bit, probably from cams pressing on it, etc. Okay, cool beans. Time to lap in a new valve and put it back together here. Yay. Yeah, it looks like that valve is pretty worn as well, just like the other one. Hopefully that's the reason there was no valve lash. This valve is just shot. Overused, I guess. High performance application is kind of punishing on durability. Okay, I've got the valve back in, put the valve spring, retainers, etc. in. Everything's fit up. It looks good. I'm gonna wrap up here for today because it is the end of the day. I only came back and did this because these valves just arrived on my doorstep at the end of the day, and I really wanted to know if this may potentially fix the problem or if I need to go back to the drawing board. Anyway, I'm gonna put this here again. Again, trying to get a white backdrop to see if those valves seem to be about the same height. I can't tell, to be honest. So the new valves, hopefully they're sitting lower because I need valve clearance between the cam and the tappets. What I'm missing are the shims at the top of the retainers. I'm waiting on a shim kit to arrive. There's my original shims. So I need to put this together, put shims in to get my valve clearances right, but at least this has my valves back together, and I kind of have some idea about what shape the valves were in. So these are definitely very, very worn. That's not good. Anyway, it's something to be aware of. This is a motocross motor. It may be prone to very rapid wear. I guess I need to get used to that. I'd rather have a track bike I could just go out and ride anytime, not worry about maintenance, but it may not be the case here. I have an enabler today. I've received a box of shims. So back on my A motor here, I have the 2 new intake valves in. I am going to reassemble the head and check the valve clearance. The issue here is on the intake valves, I do not know what size shim I need to get the correct clearance. What I'm going to do is put shims in here so they're even with the top of the buckets, and then I will go from there. Because the first thing I need to figure out is to make the valve spring retainers meet the top of the bucket so that there's no gap in there. I'm going to use that as the maximum clearance I could possibly get. So, okay, I have approximately 0.187 on the left intake valve. Again, I'm measuring the depth to the top of the valve stem. On the next one here, get 162 for the depth to the top of the spring retainer. So I'm going to grab some shims, put in those size shims there, and that should zero things out. And then I'm going to put it back together. Okay, I went ahead and put the shims in. I don't know if you can read it. The good news about the shims here is they are stamped. This is a 1.90. This one is a 165. So that's as close as I can get to being level with the top of the seat. Again, that's all I'm gonna do. These are not the final shims. This is just so that I can put it back together and then measure the gap. If I can't get enough gap, I'm screwed and have to get a new head. I'm gonna put the original shims back in the exhaust valves, however, because that was a known quantity. I didn't replace those. The head is back together superficially. I need to check the timing mark in there. The little dot on the end of the gear tooth matches with the triangle pointer. So that looks good. Flipping the engine around, I have up here where the yellow zip tie is, that's keeping the chain on the sprocket. This is almost lined up. I need to rotate it. I'm going to take the zip tie off now because the chain won't fall down. Put the bolts in here and start measuring the valve clearances. Sprocket bolts are installed. My marks line up there at the top of the head. And the timing mark in there is in position. So I should be good to go and check each of the valves now. Okay, I'm in here on this intake valve and I get 0.356 gap. That's huge, but we have new valves in here that really lowered everything. I'm gonna check the other side now, but I'm gonna start with 356. Unfortunately, my feeler gauges have huge jumps in them. I don't have a whole lot of sizes, so I'm gonna start with this, adjust the shim, put it back together, recheck the clearance because The thinner feeler gauges have finer graduations in thickness. So this gets me in the ballpark, but I don't think it's accurate enough to be taken literally. Okay, here's the last valve. The clearance is 063. That is substantially different than its partner on this side. This is so far out of spec, I don't think there's any way I can get this into spec with the valve lash. I'll look at what the actual quoted spec in the manual is, but this looks like a worthless head with a new intake valve in there. I think this is a no-go. We'll have to go to the B motor and do the same thing there and see if that one can be made to work. But the A motor is a no-go. Okay, different head. This is the B head on the A motor. I've reshimmed this. I've changed the intake valves. So I have a 155 shim here. I have a 1.80 shim here. I have a 2.15 there. It's hard to show on the camera. And then I have a 2.10 there. Anyway, this is me recording where I'm starting from. I'm going to put the cams back in and measure the gap now. I hope I'm getting close to the final spec here. 180, 190.